So in today's video we're going to be looking at identifying bias and inference within a written text, as we will need to do for our Functional Skills Level 2 English reading exam. So during this video we're going to look at what bias actually is and how we can spot it, as well as the difference between bias and inference, because inference is something a little bit different that you might also need to recognise in order to answer some of the questions within your reading exam. Bias is a disproportionate weight in favour of or against an idea or thing. So basically a one-sided opinion, whether it's good or whether it's bad. So it might be, for example, that I am writing something and I want it to entirely be positive, and that'd be a positive bias, or I'm writing something entirely negative and that'd be a negative bias. So it might be, if we take the example of a Trustpilot review, if I've been to a restaurant and I've had a really good time and I've really enjoyed it, I'd give an overwhelmingly positive review, which would have a positive bias. Similarly, if I'd been and ordered a takeaway and it had made me ill, I'd give them an overwhelmingly negative review, which would have a negative bias. Now, when we're talking about bias, and we'll touch on this a little bit later in the video, it's important to remember that provable statistics and facts cannot be biased, but fake or elaborated facts can. So for example, if I said that Metallica have got an album called Master of Puppets, that's not biased because they have. Whereas if I said I play in a band and everyone likes us, 100% of listeners think our new album is awesome, that would be a fake or elaborated or disingenuine fact, and would therefore be biased, because it's impossible. Not everyone is going to think we're awesome, because we're probably terrible. So just something to bear in mind when you're looking at that facts themselves are not biased, but can be misinterpreted or faked to make a bias use. So let's look at how we can spot bias within a text. So we've got a text given to us in our reading exam, and spotting bias within it can be quite simple if we look for some key things. The first of which is a singular viewpoint. So here we've got a quote: I never saw the captain. The only officer I saw was a young officer, a boy really. I didn't see anyone else. As quoted from one of the English resources we use, where we quote Mario Pellegrini, the Deputy Mayor of Giglio, following the sinking and subsequent rescues from the Costa Concordia. Now, having a singular viewpoint can be a clear sign that there is an opportunity for bias, because we're seeing something happen from one point of view. So if we think of when I was just giving examples of my reviews of my restaurants and takeaways, we don't get the opportunity for another point of view here. So any biases that Mario might have are going to be present within the text, and it's going to be very difficult to dispute them because we can only see it from his point of view. So to get a balanced account of something, or to make this less biased, we need another viewpoint so that we can look at the event from a different angle and see if the facts match up. That is why viewpoint is so important. Similarly, I might have a text, for example, a BMW 5 Series advert that says the BMW 5 Series is powerful, agile and intelligent, which is all overwhelmingly positive. So as well as having a singular viewpoint on a series of events, you might come across a text which has exclusively one opinion, like my takeaway reviews I was talking about earlier. Now they're trying to sell you this car, they're trying to persuade you to buy it. And you'll find a lot of persuasive texts are incredibly biased, whether they're trying to persuade you positively or persuade you negatively. Because what they're trying to make you buy this car, they're not going to tell you about the fact it's probably got bad miles to the gallon, or that it needs servicing regularly to stop it breaking down. Similarly, if I tried to sell you my car, I'd tell you it was cheap, efficient and low insurance. I wouldn't point out the fact that it's a template, it's not that great, and it's not in the best of condition, because I'm trying to sell it you. Similarly, if I was trying to convince you, if you think of a packet of cigarettes, they're not trying to tell you, action movie stars look cool, smoke. I'm struggling to think of a positive for smoking here, but they're always very negative. This is going to kill you. This is going to give you an illness. Look how bad this person looks. Look at this terrible growth on their lungs. So overwhelmingly negative. They wouldn't give you positives or try and give you a positive viewpoint the same way if they were selling it, because that would detract from their argument. So here we can see we've got a singular viewpoint, but not of a series of events, just a singular opinion. Another way we can find examples of bias is hyperbole. So here we've got an example: he killed him. As good as my witness, he is broken in half, which was JR, a WWF, now WWE commentator, when The Undertaker threw Mankind from the top of the cage at Hell in the Cell 1998. Now hyperbole is exaggeration for effect, so we're not looking to take it literally. The dude's not actually dead, he is not actually split in half. But hyperbole is the use of extreme exaggeration for effect. So they're trying to use this over-the-top, bold claim to sort of exacerbate and exaggerate how dramatic this event is. I mean, don't get me wrong, the dude's just been thrown off a 30-foot tall cage. That's pretty, extreme. But hyperbole is using an excessive description to try and make the event seem more awesome. So that would be an example of bias. You see this a lot with sports commentators, within football, boxing, MMA. How many times have you seen like a striker score a 20, 30-yard goal and that's a screamer, the goal of the season? Well, it's probably not. It's like the fourth game of the season. But they use hyperbole for effect to ramp up the excitement of the event. On a similar sort of term, we have the use of superlatives. So we use descriptive language a lot within our writing, and as every author does. But a superlative is an example of taking that to its utmost. So here we have Mike Tyson quoted calling out Lennox Lewis, where he said, "I'm the best ever, I'm the most brutal, the most vicious, the most ruthless champion there's ever been. No one can stop me. I've cut a bit out, but there's no one that can match me. My style is impetuous, my defence is impregnable, and I'm just ferocious." So here we've got a lot of use of superlatives, and superlatives, like I say, are adjectives taken to their extreme. So it's not good, it's phenomenal. It's not bad, it's appalling. It's not alright or decent, it's the best thing ever. And superlatives are a clear sign of bias because we're deliberately exaggerating it. So here Mike Tyson's not just saying that, yeah, I'm a pretty aggressive dude, he is the most vicious. His defence isn't just good, it's impregnable. And the superlatives are usually accompaniment to our one-sided opinion because they're the author helping to paint that picture that they're trying to get you to agree with, they'll get you to come on side with their bias and with their persuasion. But it's important to remember, as I was saying earlier, that provable facts can't be biased. Now, I mentioned earlier that persuasive texts tend to be where you see it. It's not very likely that in a strictly informative or an instructive text, you're going to see bias. So if you're given, for example, in your reading exam, 3 texts to choose from, and they ask you which one would you not expect to see bias in, and one of them is strictly instructional or strictly informative, like a textbook or a set of instructions, that'd be the one we'd pick as not being biased, and we wouldn't look for examples within it. You'd hope a textbook isn't going to have bias within it if it's trying to be strictly informative. Inference is a little bit different, and we'll only touch on that briefly because inference is where we're implying or inferring things without directly saying them. So things like sarcasm, humour has a lot of inference within it, and things like that. And it's where we're reading between the lines of what is being said, looking for meaning. So for example, let's say I've got a mate that's always late for everything. And I've said to one of my other friends, "Oh, where's so-and-so? They're not here." And they say, "Oh, they're running late." And I said, "Oh, that's unlike them." While I'm actually saying that it's not like them to be late, the inference and what I'm implying is they are, in fact, always late. So if you had, for example, if you're an MMA fan and you were watching Conor McGregor's early career and you missed a fight and you said to your friends, "Oh, how did that fight go?" And they said, "Oh, he threw a left hand and he knocked him out." You'd be like, "Oh, that's unusual. I wasn't expecting that." The inference is that you obviously were, because he won most of his fights by knockout or TKO. And that's what inference is. It's looking for that between the lines, implication and meaning. And while you might not necessarily get questioned on that as often as you do in bias, it is still something you need to be aware of.